Hey everybody, thank you for joining Misandry today, the weekly show where we talk about issues relevant to men. And today we have Apoc with us, or Apocrypha, and we're going to be discussing the basis of MGTOW and what it's like to be a reluctant MGTOW. And then back again, we're going to have the Q&A thought. Lily Even. Guys, introduce yourselves.
Hello everybody, I'm Apocrypha.
Now you know.
Hi guys, you already know who I am.
Exactly. All right, so with that in mind, as we normally do in the beginning of every show for the new people watching, basically we're going to have a presentation portion where we're going to have a conversation back and forth. Once the conversation portion is done, we're going to open it up for a Q&A session where Lily will grab the questions from both the chat and from the Bukkake choke slams, which I'll explain in just a moment, so that you can ask your questions. And when you ask your question, make sure you put who the question is directed to, either myself or Apoc, and then obviously what the question is. And if it's to the both of us, just put both, or everyone for that matter. As far as the way to redeem your Bukkake choke slams, on the lower right-hand side of your screen, if you are on PC or Twitch TV, you're going to see a Bukkake choke slam in green kind of scroll up every so often. And then occasionally there'll be a box that you can click on and it'll say redeem Bukkake choke slam. You can use that, click that, and that's how you can ask a question and they get logged. Now, if you're on a mobile device or you're on a Roku, I believe, you'll have to type it into the chat box. So you'll type in brackets and caps question, who the question is to, and then the question itself. Obviously, if the question is extraordinarily retarded, stupid, or completely inappropriate, we're probably not going to ask the question, but we will call you out. So, because potato lives matter. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to touch on a few things because I know that there's been a little bit of controversy lately about MGTOW, and there's this misconception that there's some kind of like MGTOW infighting going on. And it came up in last night's stream during the TFM show. I was kind of asked about it a little bit, and I wanted to be able to address that in basically kind of a real basic way. So, yeah, I'm not surprised, Lone Wolf, if I forgot to save the settings. It is what it is. We'll deal with it next time. So, thank you, though. This is a work in progress, and we were trying to adjust some settings before the stream started today. Apparently it didn't work out. So we'll see what happens. But there's this idea that there's like a MGTOW infight. So let's kind of jump back to that real quick. Yeah, exactly. I'm potatoing out. The idea of MGTOW is basically to avoid commitment, cohabitation, and marriage, and generally to avoid women. And basically ghost and be anonymous online. So with that in mind, I want to kind of turn things over to Apoc a little bit. And Apoc, I want to get your thoughts on it. First and foremost, why did you go MGTOW?
Why did I go MGTOW? Well, I went MGTOW because of the dawning realization that the environment, I live in the States, so that the environment in the States was becoming toxic to relationships. It was becoming impossible. It became impossible for me to have any kind of interactions with any kind of romantic or other interactions with women without the risk of being put through the ringer. I was married for 13 years, so that contributed to my awakening. But at the end of the day, I walked away not because it wasn't because I basically walked away because of that. That's the only reason. Because I realized, I looked around and I said, this is too risky. I can't do this anymore.
Okay, so, when you said risk, what kind of risk are we talking about? I mean, be specific.
Well, we're talking about the risk of divorce, obviously. And we've talked about that a lot in MGTOW circles in terms of how you get your ass handed to you for no good reason in a divorce. Now, I was fortunate. I spent a lot of effort to make sure my divorce did not get my ass handed to me. But most men are not so fortunate. The other risks are false allegations of domestic violence, false rape allegations, and so on. These things are being routinely used against men all over the place to basically to fuck them over when they're not doing what the woman wants them to.
Right.
And when I saw that these things were being taken seriously, that these false allegations were being taken seriously, and men were actually being put in jail. One in particular that was a friend of mine who was put in jail for rape when there was no rape that ever occurred. I know for sure there was no rape that ever occurred.
You feel comfortable getting into that story for those that haven't heard it?
No, that's no problem.
Okay.
So for years I was in the BDSM scene. I got into the BDSM scene because I wanted to understand emotional power play between men and women. I wanted to understand it better. I never really had a kink per se, but I was interested in it as a sort of art form. Does that make sense? So
yeah, it does.
Yeah. So anyway, I was in the scene for quite some time, and this friend of mine was also in the scene, and he had a few submissives that he dated. Now he had he crossed the T's and dotted the I's. He made sure that they filled out consent forms, and basically it was pretty clear that everything that occurred to her was occurring with her explicit consent. If you just read the document, it's like, oh yeah, of course, there it is. She's consenting to this stuff.
So she signed a contract to be a submissive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she signed. It's basically a list of things that are permissible by the individual that it relates to.
Okay.
So he signed it and she signed it, and it had a list of things which were okay. And some of the things were like extreme spanking and asphyxiation and things like that. Right?
Sure.
So in other words, she wanted to be choked out and she wanted to be spanked. So he broke up with her, and she immediately went to the police and filed a rape charge because they had had a session recently. And so there were marks on her body from it. And he went to jail. And he produced the documents and everything. It didn't matter. Because they said, well, the power dynamic, it was an unfair power dynamic. And it was all the things you might imagine. I don't have all the details of why the decision was made. But yeah, it was fucked up. So he went to jail. When that happened, I pieced out. I pieced the fuck out when that happened.
Right. It's actually kind of crazy. I actually worked on a divorce case out of Seattle where the husband and the wife were part of the swinger community, and she had rape fantasies, and she would text him and email him what she wanted him to do, and then he would come home and role play that, and he would leave marks on her as well. It was perfectly consensual the entire time. She ended up filing a domestic violence restraining order against him and tried to criminally charge him. And he was really just devastated by the whole thing because he was in love with her, but this was like their thing they did. And one thing led to another. And they were going to crucify him. And then he produced the texts and he produced the emails. And he was exonerated from, fortunately she didn't go after criminal charges, but she definitely went after the civil charges. So it's, it's frightening. And, it's actually kind of funny because I think that one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on this show, Apoc, is because, I hear a lot of these people that are saying, well, we could do a consent contract. Or, there's that new app that's on, I think it's an iOS store that just came out. That's like it's a hookup consent contract. None of that shit stands.
No, because they just say, oh, I felt intimidated into signing it.
Exactly. And so it's, I don't know. I think for me, it's frustrating because, again, even when you have the law on your side, it's still an uphill battle and it's still a huge, huge fight. And what's interesting is that, I talk to a lot of people who are part of the MGTOW community, and, they're just stereotyped that everybody in MGTOW is a neck-bearded, basement-dwelling virgin. But the more people I meet, the more I find, I mean, exactly,
That's fucking retarded. That's just not true.
Right. I mean, the majority of the people I meet in MGTOW are not like that. They are people who could go out and start romantic interactions with a woman if they really wanted to. They just know better.
Yeah. And well, I never had any trouble. I never had any trouble catching a woman. If I really wanted one, there's no problem. I've actually had to avoid women from wanting to catch me.
Right.
So,
right.
That's never been an issue in my life.
Right. And we're going to actually get into that as far as like being a reluctant MGTOW and some of the techniques of ghosting. One of the things you talked about and one of the things you touched on that I think that's important is why men go MGTOW, why they choose that lifestyle and that philosophy. And, I think you hit the nail on the head with the idea of the divorce laws being so lopsided. And what's interesting, I had a conversation yesterday with a British woman named Poe the Person, who was a traditionalist. And when I was talking to her about the divorce laws in the United Kingdom and the way the domestic violence laws were in the first world, she had no clue. Like it was a complete shock to her. And it's funny how people, like, they're completely ignorant of the divorce laws, yet they're having these conversations as though they have some kind of air of authority. And the reality is that they're as ignorant as the day is long. It's insane.
Yeah, they have no. I mean, that's part of the waking up to realize how bad the laws are, how bad society has become in terms of male-female relations. Yeah, and most people don't understand it. Most people say they do, but they actually don't.
Right. It's absolutely crazy. And so I guess my question for you is that, obviously you have a lot of experience in ghosting. Talk to me about some of the things that you do to ghost in your day-to-day life. Well, and more importantly, before we even get to that, let me ask you this. Why do you ghost?
Because I don't want the attention. I don't want female attention. Okay. I mean, if I get female, I have the opposite problem. Basically, if I dress to the nines and do the thing, it's. I mean, even ghosting, I still have like the receptionist at my work looking at me sideways and stuff. It's like because I'm ex-military, I'm confident, I'm not ugly, like
right.
I'm not I'm a fairly put together guy, but even ghosting. So what I do, the reason I do it is to avoid that attention.
Right.
Because if a woman wants you to approach her, she'll start doing little things. She'll start like putting herself in your way. She'll start, little accidents will start happening.
Right.
And I don't want any of that to happen because it'll become very clear that I'm rejecting her. And
that makes sense.
Once they feel rejection, they start wanting to be vindictive.
Yeah, they're spiteful.
And I don't need that. I don't need it at the office. I don't need it in public. I don't need it anywhere. So yeah. What I do to ghost is, well, how do you want me to get into it? Like just appearance and all that? Or
yeah, let's start with appearance and then mannerisms, behavior, that kind of thing.
Okay. So, well, appearance, I dress clean but down. So, blue jeans, t-shirts, maybe a button shirt. I don't wear expensive shoes, and I wear a simple cotton jacket. Just all, navy blue. Nothing that stands out. No jewelry, no nothing.
So off the rack.
Yeah, basically off the rack stuff.
Okay.
I don't go as far as, sweatpants and hoodies, but I just
I
basically try to look. There's nothing wrong with that, but that would stick out. Like
yeah, it would. Yeah, you'd look like the Unabomber, right?
Yeah, that would stick out where I am.
To me.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, right. So now we know, guys. Lily's into Unabombers. Okay.
Here we go. Gotta order a lot of pizza and leave the cartons around.
And Cheeto dust.
But there you go. But no, where I am, that's the fade in. So what you have to do is you have to look around you and see what the fade in is. So what's What's totally average for where you are?
Right.
And then just adopt that. That's it. So that's what I do. As far as mannerisms, I avoid eye contact in the street as much as I can, unless, it's a matter of politeness.
Right.
When I talk to people, I don't use any leading statements, or I don't respond to leading statements. I just end things very quickly. I just sort of act busy, even if I'm not, so that I can limit the amount of conversations that I get into with random people on the street or with, people at my office.
Right. I understand. And you're doing this just so I can kind of, I want to hammer this home. You're doing this so that you can avoid any unnecessary interactions with women, because you don't want a false restraining order or a false allegation of DV or rape or assault or anything like that. Is that a fair understanding?
That is a fair understanding. Yeah. And It's also a matter of drama, because what happens is the risk of that means that I have to deal, like, if a woman does get interested in me and I reject her and then she gets vindictive, now I have to spend tremendous amounts of energy and time in a risky situation to try and defuse it, which I've had to do in the past.
Right. And I think that part of that too is that there's also a chance of escalation there and a chance of creating more problems than you'll solve.
Very much so. That's exactly right. That's why I don't want to get into it. I don't want to jump off the hill. I want to stay below the radar.
Right.
But I don't, I'm not, the thing about ghosting is that it's not that you're acting like an asshole. You're just polite, but curt. That's it.
Yeah.
And you got to be nice, be really nice, basically.
Right. Be a nice guy, blend into the background, basically make yourself look blue pill, but not a cuck.
Yeah. But not a cuck.
Right. So let me ask you this. So why is it that you chose MGTOW rather than become an MRA?
Well, because there's no battle to be won. It's already over. It was over before I even knew there was a war. It was done. There's no stopping the train per se. At least none that I can see. Nothing that I can affect. And putting myself into an MRA context would be putting myself into harm's way. And I didn't see the chance of success being any more than a tiny, tiny percentage.
Right.
So basically the risk reward equation doesn't work for me for MRA. It's too risky. And what's the reward? Exactly. To get a woman, I can get women. What's the reward?
Right.
And how, you're not, it's when I realized that the problem was women and in general, people who aren't paying taxes voting, then I realized there was not very little I could do.
So yesterday I was on a stream with a traditionalist, a married woman, Poe the Person. She's got a small YouTube channel, and we were in the middle of the stream, and I asked her this question, and I'm going to ask it of you because she deflected it and never answered it. No disrespect to her. I think she was a little bit overwhelmed. So the question is, in your mind, what benefit is there for a man to commit to cohabitate or to marry a woman?
Children.
Okay.
That's it. That's the only reason to ever do it. But but then you're putting yourself at the mercy of the state.
Explain.
Well, as soon as you have children with a woman, then the state has 100% control over your financial well-being, essentially, through child support and other means.
Okay.
So the only, quote, benefit, unquote, that a man can get from marriage that he can't get. And the reason I say children is because clearly you could have children outside of wedlock, but that would be, in my view, that would be the only reason a man should ever, in this climate, get married. And honestly, I would say it's not a good enough reason. But that would be the only benefit, because then you have, some You have some threads, some legal threads tied to your children directly if you're married, versus
Right.
if you're not. It's not as strong a legal bond. But
Right.
Again, that may change. I mean, they've been weakening those bonds every year, so who knows? Anyway, that would be my response. Children would be it. You can get companionship and everything else without marriage.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. So as far as when you said there's no war to be fought, I mean, obviously you and I have discussed this behind the scenes when we've talked about, for all intents and purposes, when we've talked about how feminism won and how there's no war to be fought. I mean, I would go so far as to say that feminism won 20, 25 years ago.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a little gray because, when exactly did they win, unquote, but I mean, honestly, you could make a case for women's suffrage being the moment they won.
Right.
Because that set the stage for everything else that happened afterwards. But yeah, we've been fed, we've had the wool pulled over our eyes our whole lives by the political machine and by the media and by society. They're not even, most people don't even realize any of this stuff. So I would say that the war was won as soon as they got the vote, actually, because I mean, look at what happened immediately. Prohibition.
Right.
I mean, how anti-male can you get?
Right. Yeah. Back then, I mean, yeah, it was nothing but men who actually consumed alcohol at that point. And that created a lot of violence as well.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly where they went to congregate that was the male space, was the bars, back then.
Right. So, okay. Well, let me ask you this. So, would you say, even though you've chosen to go MGTOW, would you say that you are an enthusiastic MGTOW or you are a reluctant MGTOW? I mean, what is your thought? I mean, if you could choose whether or not to be MGTOW or choose to, live your life potentially with a woman in your life, what would be your choice in a perfect world? And tell me why you've made the choices you have, as far as whether or not you're reluctant or not. Because I mean, it sounds like you're reluctant to go MGTOW to me.
I am I don't want to be MGTOW.
Okay.
I never wanted to be MGTOW. I never wanted to be without women in my life. I've always enjoyed having women in my life, and I've always enjoyed their company and what they did for me, physically and emotionally. I mean, there are benefits. There are plenty of emotional and physical benefits that happen as a result of having a woman in your life. There are also many downsides, but, of course we talk about that all the time. But yeah, I would rather have a woman or women in my life than not. I'd rather not be MGTOW.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. Do you hate women?
No, I love women. That's why I don't want to be MGTOW.
Right. Now, I guess my next question then is, obviously you love women. Obviously you enjoy the companionship. Obviously, you don't hate women. Would you say it's a fair characterization of your viewpoint that even though you know that maybe not every woman is vindictive, that every woman has a capacity to be, and there's no way to restrain her hypergamy?
Every woman has the capacity to be vindictive, sure. And the way you restrain a woman's hypergamy is by using psychological. I mean, the way I've always done it is through psychological force.
Right.
Or through, saying, cut the shit out or we're done. Essentially I've never felt it necessary to strike a woman. I've never even been tempted to hit a woman ever. Words and withholding, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. Words and withholding have always been enough.
Right. And, and I think it's kind of funny too, because I mean, we joke a lot, privately as well as, on the TFM show, and just in streams in general and kind of online and Discord, we joke a lot about the pimp hand. But I think that what people misunderstand is that the pimp hand doesn't necessarily need to be physical force, right?
Not at all. No. The only time I mean, it's not necessary. And I would say, at least in my life, it's never been necessary. But it's only, I can't imagine needing to use physical force except in a situation where a woman is actually physically attacking you. Other than that, I can't imagine having to use physical force.
Right. But on the same token, though, I mean, let's take it in context. You do have a background in martial arts, and I do know that because we've had that conversation. So you can see when she's crazy enough to escalate to physical violence, and we know what the warning signs look like, so you know to pop smoke and get the fuck out before that happens, right?
That is true. Yes, that's true. I've avoided a few situations like that.
Right. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I mean, and for those people who don't know, I mean, I would say one of the most core martial arts skills is being able to recognize when something is going to go physical so that you can consciously make the choice of whether or not to accept that invitation or whether or not to avoid it before it gets to a point of no return.
Yeah, the best defense is no be there.
Exactly. I want to touch base with a couple people. I've noticed a couple things in chat. Just to kind of reiterate what Lily said before, since Lily's doing the Q&A thought thing today for me. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the stream. And if you have a question, you want to put it, if you're going to ask the question in chat, put it in caps and brackets, who the question is for, and then, of course, what the question is. If you're on a desktop machine, and I think it's Twitch TV, you're going to see little Bukkake choke slams float up on the right-hand side. You can redeem those Bukkake choke slams to ask a question. That question will be logged, and then once that question is logged, then Lily will ask those questions in order. Now, if your questions are absolutely retarded, they're potato questions, or you're a booger-eating moron, we'll just let everybody know that you've asked a booger-eating moron question so that you can be publicly shamed, and then we're going to move on to the next one without answering it. So just be aware of that. And then we'll just kind of go from there. So I appreciate you kind of let me cut in there, Apoc. Let me ask you something. Do you think that guys who go MGTOW, what do you think about self-doxing and advertising that you're MGTOW to the people around you?
Well, that goes to individual preferences, right?
Right.
I would never tell someone to do it. Put it to you that way. My advice would be don't do that. You don't understand the can of worms you're opening. But if a person is very well informed, I'm not going to stop a man. I'm not going to tell a man he's an idiot for doing it per se,
Right.
But yeah, I would say don't do it because, what you're doing is you're going against the stream. This is even right out of Buddhism when the Buddha was thinking about how do I even talk about this stuff that I've discovered? He said to himself, it's going against the stream. And I don't know if anyone will accept it. It's the same thing with MGTOW. You're going against the stream in a big way, and there are a lot of people who you're painting a target on your face. So if you can deal with that, if you're independently wealthy, and you just have stocks and bonds and royalties, and nobody can touch your money, then okay, maybe you can do it. But in my opinion, doing it is a bad idea because you're going to expose yourself to all of the ad hominem attacks you can possibly imagine. And, you could easily lose your job, lose your means of support, and so on and so forth. And it's just, I don't think it's worth it personally, because this MGTOW is about self-preservation, self-actualization, and self-attainment. It's not about proving something. It's not about yelling to, it's about screaming in the wilderness, but doing it when you're alone. You know what I mean?
So MGTOW's not a war?
Oh, hell no. No. What the fuck? No. You can't, there's a juggernaut. There's a social and cultural and political juggernaut that is on the other side. You basically have billions of dollars and many, many hundreds of millions, if not billions of people. Well, if you include gynocentric society, that's like everyone.
Right.
So billions of people who all think this way. And now you're going to say, you're going to come up and you're going to say, hi, I'm MGTOW. And by the way, all you people are wrong. You're fucked. And here's what's wrong with you, and so on. You're going to get a lot of hate. You're going to get screwed over.
They're going to crucify you. And yeah, Grizzly, I see you there in the chat. No, you don't have to be a soldier in the box. So,
no.
Yeah, it's a leaderless resistance. I agree.
It's ridiculous. I mean, you could, if you were to characterize MGTOW, I would say it's more like passive resistance.
Right.
So nonviolent resistance, basically. And it has all the hallmarks of that.
Right. And, it's interesting, though, is it like, I speak with Elizabeth Hobson occasionally, and she's kind of an anti-feminist activist out of the United Kingdom. And she was telling me that she helped organize the International Men's Day, and they actually had to conceal the location in the UK because they were concerned that feminists were going to try to shut it down. And she was aware of another group of anti-feminists / MRAs who had organized an International Men's Day, and they actually were deplatformed. Not only were they deplatformed, they were kicked out of their venue even before it started. The venue canceled on them at the last minute, and they had no place to go, and they ended up shutting it down. And again, it was all based on ad hominem attacks. It was all based on the fact that they had self-doxed, they had advertised for the event, and they gave the address. So, for those people who think that, self-doxing is the only way to go, it's not. Now, I don't condone doxing. Apoc doesn't condone doxing, but there are some people that maybe they've already doxed themselves, so there's not a lot they can do. I mean, like you look at like Terrence Popp, for example. He's doxed himself. He's MGTOW, but he doesn't do things in a way that enhances the target on his forehead. And I would assume that he lives his life and conducts his affairs in a way in order to mitigate that. But then you look at somebody like John from MGTOW is Freedom, where he doxed himself and he was witch hunted and he had his channel shut down. And so now he's trying to do MRA 2.0 with this whole new organization he's forming and things like that. And that's fine. I think that's great. But I don't believe that that's necessarily MGTOW by itself. And like TFM said last night, you could be MGTOW and be MRA, or you could be MGTOW and be alt-right, or you can be MGTOW and be, the left or whatever. But understand that there's a bright line between being MGTOW and whatever else you bring to the table as an individual. I think that's a fair assessment. What would you say to that, Apoc?
Yeah, I mean, MGTOW isn't. It's not. There's nothing political about it.
Right.
It's and I hesitate to say it's a sort of spiritual movement, but in some sense it is. In some sense, it's like, this is what's really going on. Look at the world around you. See it for what it really is. Accept it and do what's good for you. That's, that sounds pretty much like a spiritual movement, in the sense of a bunch of people who are basically saying to themselves, I really don't want to be put through the meat grinder. I want to have a chance at self-actualization in this lifetime. So that's what it means to me. That's one of the reasons I went MGTOW, was because I realized it was maximizing my chances for self-actualization in this environment, in the world as it is. So, yeah, that's what I think about that. Did I miss part of the question? Or?
No, I think you did fine. Let me ask you this. Obviously, you are no longer focused on gynocentric attention. What are the things that you do to stay motivated, to basically to find meaning in life? What are the things that you do? What are the techniques that you practice, hobbies, that kind of thing?
Well, I have a blue water sailboat that I'm fixing up, and I'm getting ready to do some long distance sailing. That's going to be a lot of fun. And enjoyable. It gives me a sense of direction and purpose anyway. What I do in my spare time to keep myself going and keep my arrow pointed in the right direction is I do a lot of research. I look at things. I have I have a lot of scientific interests. I have a degree in physics and one in mathematics. So I've kept up somewhat. So I involve myself in those communities, and I try to keep current with what's going on, specifically in rocket science. I really like rocket science. It's a lot of fun.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, then you're basically just pursuing your life, getting out of the house, doing things, involving yourself in the local community, those types of things.
Right. Yeah. And, don't get me wrong. I spent my time in isolation. When I finally decided to go MGTOW, I had to pull back into my cave for a while. I had to isolate myself for a while and not do any of that stuff just to get my head straight. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But after I was done with that, after I realized that was over, that's when I came out again, and then I had a feeling of purpose, and I was like, okay, I have these things I want to do. So things started becoming more clear once I finally had fully accepted in my bones, had fully accepted my choice.
Right.
And then I just started pursuing all the hobbies. No, I shouldn't say hobbies, pursuing the interests that I had before that I'd never pursued. I realized one day, wait a minute, I've got money, I've got time. Why the hell? Okay, I'll buy a sailboat. You know what I mean? I'll build this thing.
Yeah, you'll invest in yourself and your future.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I've been doing. So, calling them hobbies is kind of, I think, a little diminutive. I think I would call them interests.
Yeah, fair enough.
They're more than hobbies for me. I mean, they don't make me money, but they're definitely more than hobbies.
Sure. So, well, I get deeply involved in my hobbies, so but I take your point. I totally take your point.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a very individual thing. That this is actually a big problem for men, because I still feel the lack if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So it's not as if, I realized one day I was never not going to feel that. And so I didn't try to fill it up. I didn't try to walk away from that feeling of lack. I just kind of let it sit there and started to accept it. And that's when I started getting interest again in other things.
Now, for a lot of the younger MGTOW guys that are out there, what kind of suggestions would you give them as far as, guys who question their direction, maybe who may not have had good male mentorship, or, guys that are, in their 20s who are either red pill and considering MGTOW, or guys who have gone completely MGTOW, but maybe are having questions about what to do with their free time now?
I think it's a good question. And I think the best thing that any man can do confronted with this situation is to go on walkabout, which is the old sort of Aboriginal phrase for what you do is you try things. You go out into the world and you do things. And you just keep moving and keep doing things. And one day, you'll realize you've been in the same place for a while and that you're content. And that's kind of what they mean when they say, if you walk long enough, you'll meet yourself. That's kind of, it really does happen. You just have to try lots of things. Don't get stuck in a habit. Try new things all the time. And because you never know what you're going to enjoy. You might think you won't enjoy something until you try it. So try lots of things. Just go out and try lots of things. Do lots of things. Travel, try new hobbies, try new activities, meet new people. Do all the things until you figure it out.
So basically, don't isolate yourself from the world. Be a part of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, isolation serves its purpose for men, obviously, when they're wounded and healing. Sure. But you can't isolate yourself forever. You have to get out there and you have to do things in order to find your next step.
Right. Now it's clear to me that you've actually gotten through the red pill rage. So I guess my question for you is, talk to me a little bit about your experience with the red pill rage, your personal journey there, and kind of the things that you would advise men to do to kind of help them mitigate the negative aspects of the red pill rage?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. The way I got through it was by allowing it to happen, but always remembering that it was just emotions coming out. You know what I mean? So you just remember that it's not. It's your emotions and your mind are readjusting. You're going through a big change, and don't latch on to anything that's happening during the rage. Just let it all come out, and never make any big decisions. Never make any serious decisions while you're in the rage. Otherwise, you could end up fucking yourself over big time, burning bridges, getting yourself in trouble. You never know. And the way I got through it was by letting myself get angry, letting myself be sad. I don't know how many times I broke down in tears at night. It was all up and down, all over the place. I just let it all happen, and it was tough. But the thing that got me through it was understanding that it was transient, understanding that it was only going to last for so long. It was going to end. And then at the end of it, there'd be a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'd be able to find some new purpose.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely.
And I know that all sounds kind of wishy-washy, but it's literally true.
Well, it was interesting because, before I became MGTOW, that's the exact advice I would give to men going through divorce when I was working as a paralegal, was I'd say, look, you have to find a place to break down. You're going to break down. You're going to have an emotional breakdown. You're going to get angry. Yep. You're just going to get frustrated that things aren't necessarily going your way. And you have to recognize the signs of when that's going to happen. And then you got to go out of your way to find, for lack of a better term, to find a safe space to break down so that you can break down in an environment. And, there's going to be that time. And I say this from personal experience. There's going to be that time, guys, where you're going to be, curled up in a fetal ball, crying your eyes out, screaming, God, why me? I did.
That's true. Me too.
And
I spent some time on the Pacific Coast Trail too, out in the middle of nowhere, doing the same things, literally screaming into the wilderness, which, by the way, I highly recommend. It's great therapy.
Absolutely. And I think that it's important for people, for especially for men, to understand that these are tools. I mean, we used to teach this to men as part of multi-generational mentorship. We used to teach the cycle of life. When people died, you gave them sometimes 3 to 6 months to grieve, and they would go through all this, and they would go through these things, and then the community would support them. But we don't have those community supports anymore because of feminism's war on family values and all these destroyed communities. So a lot of this, even though it seems like common sense wisdom to some, I think that it's lost wisdom to many others.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's actually astonishing to me how much that particular aspect of society has degraded.
Yeah,
I didn't get very much from my male mentors. I never thought I got very much from them until I started talking to guys who were in their 20s.
Right.
These days.
It's amazing how
holy shit.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we learn through osmosis and just through hanging out and being in those male spaces and, benefiting from that mentorship. And the entire time, while we're doing it, we don't see the lessons that are there, but in hindsight, you see them crystal clearly. And I think that that's, again, that's one of the things that blows me away. The other thing I would say, as far as like the red pill rage is concerned and things like that, is to avoid violent people. I mean,
very much so. Yeah.
I know that sounds like common sense, but when you're in the red pill rage, you're upset, your compass is skewed, you're going through all these emotions that you're doing everything in your power to control and often failing. So it's really easy to kind of radicalize yourself or to get lost and to have somebody take advantage of that emotional state. Because I think in the red pill rage, I think that men are a lot more emotionally fragile. I mean, I know I was. I mean, weren't you, Apoc?
Oh yeah, yeah, very much so. I mean, my emotions hit me like, a 3-ton pile of bricks right in the face. It was very. It was. I wouldn't say. I mean, fragile. It's hard to say. I don't know if the word fragile applies so
Maybe
much as
vulnerable.
Intense.
Yeah.
Completely intense. Yeah. Very intense breakdown. Kind of crazy. Yeah. Powerful emotions that just came rushing out as soon as you because we learn to bottle them up, and when you actually let them out, it can be really difficult to deal with.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was very emotionally fragile, very emotionally vulnerable, and I took steps to deal with that by spending time on my own, letting it out in small doses, and then in big doses when I would be alone.
Yeah. The other thing I would say too is that, for those guys in the red pill rage, or those guys in that frame of mind, stay away from alcohol, stay away from drugs, because those things even if you're used to doing drugs, even if you're one of those guys who, this is what you do, like there are people out there who use psychedelics recreationally. There are people who are recreational marijuana smokers. And then of course you've got, people who like to go to happy hour. If you're in the middle of the red pill rage, 4 drinks turns into 10 drinks, and then all of a sudden there are problems. And some of those problems that happen are forever life altering. So.
Very much so, yeah. And that's the thing. When you're emotionally frayed and raw, you're a lot more vulnerable to addictive behaviors. So you won't even realize you've had 10 drinks.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, it's best to be if you're going through the rage, it's best to stay away from all that shit. And potato chips too.
Potato chips, huh?
Yeah, stay away from bad food. Stay away from junk food, because you'll start using food as a crutch, and you'll blow up like a balloon.
Yeah, I've seen that. The endorphins from the eating.
Yep.
At that point, they replace it, and people use it as a crutch.
Exactly. And dessert, sugar. Basically, it's like, I mean, I know this sounds classically weird, but the advice I would give is, once you make this choice and you're going through the rage, you should make a pledge to yourself to live your life for the next, say, 6 months like a monk. Like literally like a monk. Discipline your day. Don't do any substances. Stay away from sugars and fats and all the crap. And just be very disciplined, because that's the only way you're going to give yourself.
Just so FYI, your mic is popping a lot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is this
no, it's fine. Yeah, it's better. Go ahead.
It's the only way. The best way you can shield yourself against the negative consequences of this, and to give yourself enough room to actually experience all these emotions, is to create discipline in your day-to-day life. So if you I'm a monk for the next 6 months, if you just do that, then you'll end up, I think, doing a lot better.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I know that, like with my life, for example, I created a structure, and having that structure, it's a self-imposed structure. So having that structure makes my day-to-day life a lot easier. And now there's things that I don't even think about that I just do. And, again, keeps you busy, keeps you off the couch, keeps you motivated, and, keeps you moving forward. Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And you'll take some of those good habits with you into the next part of your life too.
Exactly. Well, I think we've had a pretty good conversation. Is there anything that you wanted to kind of build on or develop before we head to Q&A?
Oh, wow. I have so many things.
Fair enough.
But
we've got time. We've got time.
Yeah.
So,
but mainly, I guess I'll just restate that. I think there are probably quite a few men who are doing this, who are being MGTOW, acting MGTOW, or becoming MGTOW, and don't want to. And I'm here to say that it really is. I mean, in my mind, it's necessary in order to provide yourself with a sense of self-preservation and a sense of self-ownership, because otherwise you're exposing yourself to all of the possibilities that we talk about on a day-to-day basis. So the stereotypical MGTOW idea is just what it sounds like. It's stereotypical. The reality is there's a lot of men in a lot of pain and who don't want to do this. And I'm one of those guys. I don't want to do this, but I'm doing it because for me, it's the safest and most, it's the best way for me to be safe and to actualize my life. And one last thing, don't let anybody call you selfish for doing this. You're not being selfish. Taking care of yourself is not being selfish. It's the same reason why they say, if you're on an airliner and they tell you how to use the oxygen masks, they say, make sure you put your oxygen mask on before you help someone else. You can't help somebody else. You can't help the world unless you are good. So first you, then everyone else. That's not selfish. It's just common sense.
Yeah, it's self-preservation. And I want to underscore something here too. I'm a reluctant MGTOW. I would enjoy the companionship of women, and I would enjoy being in a committed relationship if that were realistic. But the reality is that with the feminized divorce laws, with the domestic violence laws that are out there, with the saturation of feminists at every level of the courts, in academia, and the bullshit surrounding the Duluth model, and all the social indoctrination that feminism has inflicted upon the world, really the smart move is to go MGTOW. It's to avoid these relationships. It's to avoid the commitment, the cohabitation, and marriage, and to really avoid unnecessarily interacting with women unless there's a specific purpose for it. Because at the end of the day, again, it's not that every woman is going to screw you every time. It's that they can, and there is no recourse for it if they choose to do so.
That is true. I actually, by the way, I do have some female friends, but I've known them for a very long time, so they're like sisters.
Right.
Other than that, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I wish it weren't true. That was part of me going through my red pill rage. I really wish this wasn't true. But I've spent most of my life staring unblinded into whatever it is that's true and not flinching, and that led me to MGTOW.
Right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come out today and to have this conversation. At this stage, we're going to go ahead and open up to the Q&A and see if we've got any questions. Again, if you see the little Bukkake choke slams going up on the right-hand side of the screen from the bottom, you can click the little box that appears there when your mouse scrolls over it. You can ask a question. It'll get logged into Streamlabs once you choose Redeem Bukkake Choke Slam. If you're on a mobile device or you don't have access to the Bukkake Choke Slams there, you can ask your questions in the chat box. I see Morpheus has done so already. So we've got, you basically question in caps and brackets and then direct the question to who it's to, unless it's to everybody. And then we'll go from there and we'll get started. Lily, do you have any questions for us so far?
Yeah, I have a couple. I was kind of taking them during the stream. All right, first question for Apoc. You mentioned you took steps to minimize the damage in your pending divorce. What steps did you take?
I spent, it's kind of it's a long story, but basically what I did was, to sum it up, what I did was over the course of several years, and by the way, I don't recommend this, but it was necessary for me. Over the course of several years, I turned myself into a man that my wife would no longer have interest in. That wasn't very easy to do, but I did it. And eventually, and there were no children. And eventually, when the divorce happened, it was perfectly amicable. And I actually used a, I don't want to get into specifics, but I used a sort of financial trick to keep her from asking for alimony. So I threatened her with some debt that existed. that she'd be responsible for half of it, or I'd be responsible for all of it and she doesn't ask for alimony. So that was I would say, the coup de grace, was using debt as a tool to eliminate the request for alimony at the end.
Okay. We satisfied with that answer? Are we ready for
Absolutely.
the next question?
Next question.
Okay. For the guest, can you say more about your inner struggle going MGTOW, only hobbies, only individual, versus giving women and society another chance? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes. I understand. That's the thing. I gave society and women a lot of chances. A lot. I mean, I'm over 50.
One thrust at a time.
Yeah, one thrust at a time. I had after my divorce, I had 2 long-term, meaning more than 6-month relationships, and 7 short-term relationships and a bunch of casual affairs. I basically did what I said. I did a walkabout, and that all of that eventually led me to MGTOW. So I gave society and women the chances. I dated lots of different kinds of women from different backgrounds, from different countries, from different. I needed to prove to myself that this was endemic, rather than this was part of what was going on in the real world, rather than just me failing to pick the right woman, which is what everybody says, right? Oh, you picked the wrong one.
Yeah.
Well,
I hear that a lot.
Yeah. So I went on a picking spree. I even randomly picked women, and without, being particularly psyched about them, and none of it worked. And I realized that I was looking at a fundamental problem, and that's when it all kind of hit me in the face. So I didn't like it, obviously. I spent a long time running away from it. But in the end, I came to MGTOW because, at least for me, it was the only rational choice to make. I basically proved to myself that the problem wasn't me.
Okay. Next question.
Next question, also for the guest. What is your day-to-day life structure / framework?
Well, right now I work a 9 to 5, so my life revolves around that. But on weekends, I do one of two things. I either play a lot of Kerbal Space Program, which I really enjoy, or I go and I spend time fixing up and sailing my boat. I also have some loose social ties where I am, where I spend, but my weekends are kind of up for grabs. My weekdays are, I get up in the morning, I shower, I go to work, I do my thing, I come home, I relax, and I engage in intellectual pursuits and domestic chores. It's a pretty simple life, and I kind of like it that way. But yeah, so that's my basic structure. Oh, I didn't mention, I'm sorry, I guess maybe you were interested in something else. I also meditate twice a day, in the morning and at night. I meditate for at least 30 minutes in the morning and at night.
Okay. Ready for the next question?
Yep.
Also for the guest, they love you, Apoc. Since you're going monk for some time, what sort of internal changes do you expect at the end of your monkhood?
Well, I don't know, but I can tell you what changes I've had so far.
That'd be good. Share them.
Yeah. One of the changes that I found interesting was that I suddenly, the whole zero fucks given thing really took hold. So in other words, someone saying something critical about me that was totally unfounded, but socially harsh, literally has no emotional effect on me at all. That was a really nicely surprising little thing. Another thing that has occurred is that I'm a lot more resilient in terms of random events that might occur day to day. It doesn't, like, change doesn't bother me as much as it used to, if that makes sense. Like, in other words, if something random happens to me, I can deal with it fairly easily. And I found that my mind has become more clear as well. And I found that, my mind has become more clear, and I've become a lot calmer, a lot less angry, and a lot more focused. So those are the things that have happened so far in general terms.
Okay. The next one's not really addressed to someone, so either one of you guys can answer. What is your advice for men, MGTOW men specifically, who still love women but know their nature and the reality of modern feminism?
I think that, and obviously Apoc, go ahead and add on anything you think I've missed. Apoc and I both love women. We don't hate women at all. But when it comes to commitment, cohabitation, and marriage, there's no benefit for a man outside of childbearing. But even childbearing, the risk is not worth the reward. And Apoc kind of hit the nail on the head on that earlier in the stream. And so, I guess, you can still love women, just keep them at a safe distance. I mean, again, it's not that
every day. It hurts me every day.
Absolutely, and it's something that I think that most rational MGTOW men, at some point, they struggle with, and so, it's not a perfect situation, but it is one that prevents your life from being destroyed. It prevents your social life, your financial life, and potentially your legal status destroyed, because they can destroy you completely, and then you'll end up behind bars not knowing how you got there. Apoc, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. If you think about it, you always say, one of the things I've said to myself is, how the hell did it get this far without me noticing? Without anyone noticing, really. And the inevitable answer is in yourself. I realized that I'm built to love women. That's how I'm built. And I can redirect that into hate. I can redirect that into bitterness or despair or whatever, or I can just accept it and allow the lack to sit there. But the thing is that that's why this all happened. This happened because men are built to love women. All of these crazy laws happened because men are built to love women. And if you accept that, you understand that, then you won't necessarily succumb to bitterness or despair. At least that's certainly been my experience. My experience has been, I felt in despair for a while, and I certainly felt bitter, but I let that all ride, and eventually I just came back to the feeling of lack, and I realized that wasn't going to go away, so I just let it be. That's how I'm built. So, okay. Yeah, that's what I would say.
All right. Next question.
For the guest and DDJ, this question is about the daily micromanagement of the red pill. How do you manage going from endorphic highs of I am my own man to the downs of, gosh, what an idiot I was believing in unicorns?
Everybody has hindsight. Hindsight's 20/20, and I manage it the same way I managed learning how to ride a bicycle when I was a little kid, or learning how to walk, or learning any new skill. The reality is that anytime you learn something new, you're going to try and fail a variety of times, and you're going to fail differently every time until you're successful. It's the same thing with the red pill. You need to wake up and realize this is your situation. This is your life experience. This is where things are. There was a time where, I loved my ex-wife. I felt bad that she was gone. I felt an emptiness there. There was a hole. But, at the end of the day, you get used to that situation. You get through the depression. You get through the red pill rage. You get through the frustration and the hole there. And really at the end of the day, I think it's a choice. You can either choose to be upset about what you don't have, or you can choose to learn to appreciate what you do have and build on it. And again, I think that APOC hit the nail on the head. You have to stay busy. You have to be out in the world and do things, whether it's socializing with your friends or expressing your interests or hobbies, and involving yourself in your society and your community. You can do all those things free from gynocentric influence. And the more that you do that, the easier that those situations work for you. And again, it's trial and error. When you learn how to ghost, you will fail. You'll make attempts to ghost, and there'll be somebody who sees through it, and maybe it's some woman who's interested in you. Well, you just got to ghost better next time. So you do what you can, you trial and error, and you work forward, and you move forward, and you focus on moving forward, and you don't focus on the past failures beyond what did I do wrong, what can I do right, and how do I avoid that mistake in the future. Apoc?
Yeah, screaming in a pillow helps. I do that sometimes.
as long as you're not biting the pillow, I suppose we're okay.
As long as you're not biting it. Yeah, as long as there's nobody else in the room, you're fine.
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean, not being afraid to fail is really important for anyone really, but for any man to understand is don't be afraid to fail. Just limit your losses and move on. Yeah, because if you're afraid to fail, you're afraid to succeed. So
agreed.
And as far as dealing with the backwash of emotions and stuff, yeah. I mean, literally, I was only half joking. I really do use the technique of screaming into a pillow sometimes at night when I remember things I did that were stupid and I feel the emotion come up. I just scream into a pillow. I feel a lot better afterwards.
Okay. All right. Lily, next question.
Okay, next question. To DDJ and guest. Are all or most women inherently disloyal cheaters, and why or why not?
I have a saying that I use a lot, and that is that every woman is a slut if you catch her on the right day.
Yeah, I heard that one coming.
Yeah, exactly. That was the setup, I guess. I don't know who asked that question, but thank you for that. I think it's not that women are inherently cheaters. It's that they're hypergamous biologically, and it's the hypergamy that leads them to potential infidelity rather than we're just going to be sluts 100% of the time. So you might have a woman whom you're committed to and you're in a marriage with, and everything is great, and then maybe that one time out of the year when either she's traveling or you're traveling or something happens, you get kind of a sense that something is wrong. Then you find out later that she was binge fucking the neighbor while you were traveling, or while she was traveling. She's binge fucking somebody that she meets once a year. I mean, I've known women that's what they do. They go out once a year, they see what's out there, they do a little catch and release, they fuck some other guy, and then they go back to being the loyal wife when they're done. And, I've known other women who were completely loyal to their husband and got dumped for their trouble. So, I mean, it's not that every woman is a slut. It's that every woman will be a slut if you catch her on the right day in the right circumstances. Apoc, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's important to reiterate that this is an instinct, and that if women didn't have this instinct, we wouldn't be here today. I mean, it's the work of civilization has been to restrain male and female instincts and redirect our energies towards the building of civilization, right? In the women's case, it's hypergamy. In the man's case, it's dominance.
Right.
The reason things are so fucked up is because women have been completely unchained, but men have been more chained. And that's why everything is fucked up. There's no balance. The whole cheating thing, the only reason, the reason we have monogamy is because we have civilization. If we were in nature, monogamy wouldn't exist. But then we'd all be burning shit for warmth. So you got to figure out how to make that trade. And the way you make that trade is by balancing rights and responsibilities, and by chaining in the hypergamous and the dominance instinct to reining in, and redirecting people towards the process of building the world.
Right. And so there's a balance.
Yeah. And if there's not a balance, everything's fucked. And that's why everything's fucked up now.
Right.
Because there's no balance. Men are completely chained, like ridiculously chained. and women are completely unchained. It's completely unbalanced, and it has nowhere to go but down.
Okay. Next question.
Okay. DDJ and Apoc, where do you draw the line between loving women and having female companionship to a safe and comfortable degree?
I think
That's a tough question.
That is a tough question. I had to think about that too. I was like, shit. That is a hard question. I think really it's the challenge is trying to avoid being emotionally attached to women you care about. I mean, I have female friends in my life who, some of them are very, very close to me, but I avoid the emotional attachment because at this stage, it's the safest thing to do. Every time I think, well, maybe this or maybe that, then I remember, oh shit, I worked in family law for 10 years and I watched these guys get crucified. I was crucified in 2 separate divorces. I need to really be thinking about my decision-making process. And so, taking a daily dose of red pills is important at some level, but I also believe that remembering what the potential cons are extremely important. And so, being able to maintain those friendships again it's important, but at the same token, you have to do it from a safe distance in an effort to protect yourself. And what's interesting is Human was asked a very similar question last night because Human has a girlfriend, and he gave some pretty good advice. So I don't want to necessarily reiterate all of that here. So TFM posted the TFM show on his YouTube channel. Check it out. And, there's a Q&A session from Human, and he was asked that question. And he kind of went into detail about what he does to protect his autonomy in that. And again, this is something that's his personal choice. I'm not at a place where I think I could have a romantic relationship right now with anybody just because of the way the circumstances are in the world. But I think that, it's a hard balance to achieve. And for anybody who says, oh, I got this and this is fun, they're full of shit, because we were made to love women. We were made to give women the bukkake chokeslam, and women were made to love us back. That's the reality. That is the biological situation. And it's really difficult sometimes because of the dominance instinct, and I have challenges with it. So yeah, I mean, it's a balance. And again, you've got to do things and you've got to live your life in a way to where you have that structure and you have that self-discipline. And again, that takes practice, that takes time, that takes dedication. Apoc?
Yeah. I have some close female friends as well. And I mean, one of them is very close, and I sort of care about her like a sister, if that makes sense. But I wouldn't recommend that for anyone. It was something that just sort of happened rather than something I designed. So I wouldn't recommend someone trying it because it takes a lot of history for that to work. Like, I've known her for more than 10 years, so there's that. But otherwise, yeah, women are people, for fuck's sake. I mean, we talk all the time about female nature and moral development being less than men and them not being as smart as men and so on. That's all true, but women are still people. They still do people things, and you need to know how to socialize with women. You need to be comfortable with it. You need to be okay forming acquaintances with women and not getting sucked into emotional drama. Otherwise, how are you going to function in the broader world?
Right.
So you need to know how to do that. And you need to be okay with it. It's not like some master strategy. This isn't like some big Machiavellian thing. You need to be okay with it. It needs to be okay. It needs to feel good for you to hang out with people where it's a mixed group and everything's fine. It needs to feel okay. And once you've achieved that, you're fine. I think.
Yeah, and I will say this too. I think you brought up another good point. Having acquaintances with women in many cases is going to be necessary. If you need to go get a loan for your house, if you need to go do business with a business, or a company, or maybe you need to interact with your HR department because you need something at work, there's a good possibility you're going to have to be interacting with a woman. So if you just look at her and be like, "Be gone, thought," yeah, you're going to lose your job. You're not going to get the loan. You're not going to, it's retarded. Yeah. So you have to be able to interact with women. You have to be able to communicate with them. And more importantly, if you go out of your way to actively avoid women in a professional setting when it's necessary to interact with them, that's not ghosting, because you're going to draw a target on your head and you're going to look like that crazy ass serial killer in the corner rocking back and forth. Nobody wants that. So
yeah, exactly. You can't do that at a workplace. You have to be. You just have to learn how to deflect. If you get attention, you have to deflect it.
Right.
Make an excuse, whatever. Like just don't engage at all with any of the emotional drama. Don't answer any personal questions. Well, here's a piece of advice that I think works really well. Never ever answer personal questions at work. Beg off personal questions, because that's people's openings. That's people's openings into all sorts of shit. If you just never answer personal questions, you never get into any kind of bullshit, and that has saved me from a lot of drama. Let me tell you.
Right.
So, yeah, and if you have to, just say, I'm not really comfortable talking about that part of my life at work, but do you want to talk about something else?
Yeah, I used to always say I leave my home life at home.
Yeah, something like that. Exactly.
The other thing I would say too, for anybody that's interested in learning a little bit more about that, how to conduct themselves in the workplace, I would recommend 48 Laws of Power. It's a fantastic book, and it teaches a variety of good deflection techniques that basically it's a bit of a survival guide. It wasn't meant for MGTOW, but it translates the teachings in that book translate to MGTOW extremely well. So, Lily, do we have a next question?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of questions here, guys. Just letting you know. All right. So, for both of you, what do you answer to people when they ask you how come you're still single?
Oh, I just tell them I haven't found the right woman yet. I'm actively looking. I haven't found the right woman yet. And they're like, well, what do you mean you haven't found the right woman? I said, well, I need a woman who's not a single mom. I need a woman who has a job and has her own car. I need a woman who is not living with her parents or having somebody else pay her freight, that kind of thing. I need a woman with no criminal record. And most importantly, I need a woman with no mental health history. And they all fail that. So I'm usually pretty safe. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I can think of a notable banana peel that I've slipped on, but, beyond all those things, yeah, I mean, I don't worry about it. I just say, I haven't found the right woman yet. That's usually what I say.
Well, in my case, since I'm divorced, I just say I had mine and it didn't work out, so I'm just living my life. And if they press, I just go into something similar to what DGJ said. I just say something along the lines of, either I haven't found the right one, or since I'm 50, I just say, well, the chances of me finding a woman who doesn't have any children or emotional baggage at this point is pretty much impossible. So I'm just begging off.
Right. It's nothing but high mileage rental cars at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, I could go after a 22-year-old, but no. But no.
Oh. All right, guys. Next question.
Okay.
All right, for both of you again. Is it possible for men to trust women 100%? What kind of signs would a woman give to show that she's trustworthy?
I think limiting that to women is naive. And I think that when it comes to trust, I think that you should apply trust to everybody. Now, my opinion is this: if I can't trust you, I don't do business with you. I don't deal with you. All relationships are built on trust, whether they be a personal relationship, a professional relationship, whether it's male, female, attack helicopter, it doesn't matter. You trust, but you verify, so you reconcile. So like if you run a business, right, you have a business and every month you do a profit and loss statement. And part of that profit and loss statement is determining where your expenses are, determining where the problems are, and figuring out how profitable that relationship point is. And at the end of the day, you have to reconcile. So you trust but verify always. And if you can't verify the trust, then you don't have it. So it's possible to trust anybody 100%, but then you have to ask yourself the question about, can you trust them in a particular context? So in other words, you might have an employee that you work with, like a coworker, and he may be a fantastic coworker, and his ethics are on point, his work ethic is on point, his skills are on point, he's trustworthy, he's reliable, he's consistent, but maybe that person, male or female, maybe they're a slut. Maybe they lie in their personal lives. Okay, so you trust them at work, but you would never trust them in an interpersonal relationship because you know better. And it's the same thing. You might have people in your life whom you trust in your personal life, but you realize that when it came to their professional life, they're retarded and unreliable. And it's not that they're honest or dishonest. It's just you're smart enough to know that you can't trust them in that context. So is there a way to trust these people? Yeah, if you can verify it. But you have to consistently verify. You have to consistently reconcile because things can change. And when things change, that's really the challenge. I mean, I trusted my second wife implicitly multiple times during the relationship. But then there were other times during the relationship where I realized that there was just no way I could trust her. And because I verified. So you really have to verify. So you never blindly trust anybody. I don't care who they are. But trust but verify, and then when you can verify that they're untrustworthy, that's when you stop trusting them. Apoc?
Yeah, no, that's really good. I would just add, well, you specifically asked about women, but I would just add that you can go by a sort of how much you get, how much they give is what they get kind of thing. Like, in other words, you can only trust you as a rule of thumb, only ever trust someone as much as they've already demonstrated their reliability to you. So you just give a little bit if they give a little bit. You give a little bit and then they give a little bit back. You know what I mean? Take little risks, and as each risk pays off or doesn't, then you can gauge how trustworthy the person is. But so that's the standard model. But of course, none of this matters when society permits people to suddenly no longer be trustworthy and there are no consequences.
Right.
You could be trustworthy for 5 years, prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, and then suddenly just stab your friend in the back. And if there are no consequences for you for doing that, then can you really trust anyone? Especially, and that of course applies to women in this case, because I'm referring to society allowing women to completely railroad men just because they changed their minds or whatever, for whatever reason.
Right. And the other thing I would add to that as well, and this is something that you just reminded me of, thank you, and that is that too many people in life, they start out their relationships with 100% trust. On a good day, that's retarded. And on a bad day, it is suicidal. Relationships should never start from a position of trust or a position of distrust. They should start at ground zero. And then that person's actions, again, once you've reconciled them, once you've been able to verify them, will determine whether or not they're trustworthy. But again, it's something that should occur over a period of time. And I would agree with Apoc completely that, I would also even add to what Apoc said, not only could a woman violate a man's trust at any time, but because of the way the feminist laws are and because of gynocentric society, women are incentivized to do it. So... yeah.
And as is true in economics, if you incent something, you get more of it.
Exactly. All right. Next question. Lily, are you dead?
Sorry, I had a blonde moment. Mike was muted.
Fair enough. Typical woman. All right.
All right. Yeah, typical woman. So, what caused you to want out of the marriage? I'm assuming that was for Apoc.
Go for it.
Yeah. So everything started really well, and she's an intelligent and interesting person with a degree in art history. So she was always really fun to be around, really smart, very handy with computers and lots of really cool things. Easy to talk to, so on and so forth. And of course, she was beautiful. And I met her when she was 19, FYI. So, but some years into the marriage, her initial energy, which corresponded to her working and doing things and being alongside me and walking with me, eventually turned into, as my earning potential increased, she slowly backed off. It got so bad she was put through I put her through a trade school out of my back pocket, and on the condition that she would work in that trade, right away and make her bones so that she could get something under her feet for herself. And she never did it. She never really did it. And she just kept going backwards and sliding backwards and sliding backwards. It seemed, basically what happened was I earned more money. She decided she didn't need to earn as much. And so she just kept doing less and less until it was just impossible. I mean, she was barely even doing domestic stuff. So it just became untenable. And I realized what was happening, and I realized there was very little, or if any, there's nothing I could do to stop it. So, and I tried, believe me.
Right.
But nothing worked. And so I just, planned my exit strategy, and that's what happened. I'm really happy that there's no children, because there could have been, but I nipped that in the bud real quick. So.
Perfect. All right. Next question.
Okay. For both of you again. How do you deal with friends of yours who are blue-pilled, unbearably so? Like, unbearably blue-pilled people? Go.
I actually, a lot of like the hardcore blue pill people in my life, I don't fuck with anymore. I just don't have time for the Cuck Lives Matter crew. I lost a lot of social opportunities in doing so, but it's just that, you can share information, you can provide the example for people, and they're just not emotionally ready to handle it, or they approach it and then they can't handle it and they move on. I have one friend that I know, for example, his wife cheated on him, and he didn't have the balls to dump her. And they had a kid, and he was like, oh, I'll just forgive her and everything will be fine. Then she cheated on him again. And, and this is a guy that, in all other respects, would be considered to be alpha. But again, she cheated on him twice. He's super blue pill about it. He's, when it comes to her, it's the gynocentric blind spot. And he forgave her. And I'm like, fucking dump the bitch. Cancel her like a bad check and move the fuck on. And he couldn't do it. And so I don't fuck with him. And, and I also have, it's actually kind of funny too, because I do have friends who are married and their wives do not want their husbands hanging out with me at all. I mean,
yeah, right.
It's the entertainment value is hilarious. So, when I do go over there, I make sure I troll the wives while I'm there, but gently, of course, because I don't want to get disinvited. But honestly, I honestly just don't fuck with them. So if they're super blue pill, it's not that I cut them off. It's that they censor themselves. I mean, sometimes, the trash takes itself out. So you just got to remember, garbage can, not garbage cannot.
I have a slightly different strategy. I do that too, but I have a bunch of blue pill friends who, one of whom just had a baby actually, and so what I do is I just deflect. If they ask me about my personal life, I give the answers like we talked about earlier, and when I basically don't give them advice, is what it comes down to. I just don't give them advice on relationships at all. Because I know what's going to come out of my mouth and it's not going to go well. So I just let it all go. And instead of talking about any of that shit, we talk about other things like, fishing or something. So that's what I do with my blue pill friends.
Okay. Next question.
Okay. I'm just a little bit torn about which ones to do next.
Okay.
All right. We'll do the one I've been avoiding. What are your thoughts on narwhals, and what are your thoughts on the cock carousel, and how this relates to like effects in the modern world for men.
So that's actually pretty interesting. So NAWALs don't exist. I believe that the women who have been loyal to their men have done so by choice. And I believe when it comes to the male-female interaction, that commitment starts where desire stops. What that means, though, is that if a woman is to be committed to a man, she's going to have to successfully fight her hypergamous instinct. And given that women are incentivized to give into their hypergamy in this society, the women capable of doing that are practically non-existent. As far as the cock carousel is concerned, the more sexual partners that a woman has, the less likely she's able to pair bond with a man. And science has actually confirmed this. But more importantly, there have been studies done, especially in Seattle at Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center, where they found that women who don't have children end up having male DNA inside them that they didn't have before. And one of the theories is that it's the result of basically their acceptance of the male sperm donation during intercourse, that somehow it's been incorporated into their DNA. That's one of the theories. And this
so
is
I actually read the white paper on that.
So did I. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing about it.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's one of the theories. One of the other theories is that since women do fairly often have a fertilized egg that doesn't implant or implants but falls away, and they don't even know it.
Right.
In other words, they don't technically get pregnant, but they had a fertilized implanted egg. It could be that the Y-DNA is getting, because we know that women who do have male children have Y-DNA incorporated into their bodies. That's very, very common.
Okay.
So one of the theories is that microchimerism happens just because a woman takes sperm into her body at all. But the other one is that maybe she didn't quite get pregnant, and that's what caused it. They don't know yet, right. So they're still working on it. But.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that when they actually got to that stage of the research, they stopped. So
yeah, I know.
I thought that was kind of amusing. I mean, it's very clear that there's not enough research into that area, because I think that really, if they had done a deep dive into that research, I think that might give us a little bit more scientific proof or debunking of the cock carousel when it comes to certain things. But again, I think that women who ride the cock carousel, they can't pair bond with men. They become more insecure. They become more mentally unstable. And I say more mentally unstable because I think that every woman at some point is a little bit crazy. And that might be my own internal bias, but whatever. But again, I think that it's a pair bonding issue. I know women who have been with lots of partners, and I've been friends with them, and they're like, I can't pair bond, or they're like, they feel numb. So yeah, I think those are huge issues. Apoc, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just that I think, and from a common sense perspective, it makes sense that if a woman has sex, because women have an enhanced flight response too. That's another reason why women are a little bit crazy, because they don't really have testosterone, not as much as men. So the way men deal with adversity is through focus. And when women run out of testosterone, they start secreting adrenaline, right? So
right.
They freak out. So there's actually a biological reason why women are a little crazy. But yeah, I don't really have much more to add. So yeah, that's about that.
Next question.
All right. I'm going to try and do a couple of quick questions. Okay. Apoc, your twice daily meditation is only Samantha, whatever that means. Or
Shamatha.
Okay. Thank you.
I do Shinkantaza, which is a combination of Shamatha and Vipassana, which is hard to explain, but for all intents and purposes, it's Shamatha. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the other half of that was, do you do any other meditative practices?
Yes, I do visualization practice and deity practice. I'm a Tibetan Buddhist, so Tibetan yogi. So I do. There are a number of different kinds I do. But the primary one that I do to get my head straight is shamatha vipassana.
Okay.
I will say I've done lots of other. I mean, I've practiced zazen. I've done a lot of different styles, so I'm familiar with a lot of them.
Okay. Someone else says, I see the reasoning behind dressing average to ghost and blah, 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 but what about dressing well and grooming well to create a favorable first impression on other people?
I think when it's required, sure. I don't think that's an issue
Yeah.
when it's required. But I also believe that if you want to create a favorable first impression, you can do that without dressing to the nines. I mean, obviously, if you wear clean clothes that are pressed and neat and taken care of, you can wear mid-range clothing or mid-range clothing for your environment and still make that good first impression. So I think it's more of how you act, how you comport yourself as much as it is the way you're dressed. I think that if you actually need to dress to the nines in order to impress somebody, then maybe you need to reconsider your environment.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing. Whatever is appropriate is what you do. So if you're ghosting in public, just in public places, that's different than going to a business meeting. If you're going to a business meeting, then you should dress appropriately for the business meeting.
Right.
It's not, ghosting isn't about, it's not about becoming some kind of invisible man. It's just about keeping unwanted attention away from you in your day-to-day life.
And blending.
And blending, yeah. So if you're going to a high-level business meeting, well, of course you're going to show up in a suit. Everyone else is going to be there in a suit, so of course you're going to be there in a suit. But don't go there in an Armani suit unless you're a CFO.
Right.
Okay. Any advice for MGTOW or red pill guys who still deal with women?
Yeah. Don't fuck them where you work. Don't fuck them where you live, and don't fuck them where you go to school. Because when it comes time to stop fucking them, you can dump them easier. If you fuck them in any of those environments, the amount of backlash is super high. Again, this is not like a PUA stream or anything like that, but this is just kind of common sense sort of stuff. The other thing I would say is that the second that she demonstrates that she's untrustworthy, ghost her. Don't look back, because the thing is that women don't lie because it's Tuesday or because it was raining or because they got their period. They lie for a reason. They lie to conceal, they lie to cover up, and sometimes they lie by omission. So learn the different types of dishonesty. And when a woman is not being truthful to you, when she is not being honest with you, when she's not being forthright with you, that's the time that you need to be done. The other thing I would say is that, obviously if you're having sex, flush your condoms down the toilet. Don't let her sperm jack you at all. Listen, 41% of women lie about being on birth control. And, I had a good friend of mine who was with a woman who said, oh, I'm infertile. I can't get pregnant. They have a kid now. So listen, nothing of what they say, half of what you see, that's what you should trust. Again, don't trust anything of what they say and only trust half of what you see. And if you can't verify it, don't trust it. Always trust and verify. And be fucking safe out there. The second time that she goes crazy, or the second that she tells you that she has cheated on a previous guy, or the second that she's told you that her former boyfriend was abusive, the odds of her falsely accusing you go way through the roof, because the bigger the thought she is, the more likely she's going to falsely accuse you. Apoc, what do you got to add?
Don't do it. But in lieu of that, I agree with everything you said. I would reiterate, the main thing is controlling the relationship and not shitting, as you said earlier, not shitting where you eat is essentially what you meant earlier. Yeah,
exactly.
So you never date someone that you live too near, or that you work with, or anything like that. Where if there's a high chance you'll meet them in some other setting that's in your day-to-day life, don't fucking do it. I mean, hell, go to another state.
Yeah. Go to another state, go to another town, go to another county.
Yeah.
Leave the country.
Or leave the country, exactly.
Yeah, Lily, you'd like that, wouldn't you?
Now you know. All right, next question.
Trolling. Okay. So this question is for all three of us. All right, it's kind of a long one. Here we go. You say that MGTOW is a passive philosophy, walk away, ghost, etc., and that makes perfect sense from all that I know about MGTOW. But in the same breath, you also say that we need to take away women's rights, specifically voting rights, a way to solve and resolve problems that are tearing Western civilization down, which also makes perfect sense. Are these These are mutually exclusive terms. How do we resolve these conflicting points?
All right, so if I understand the question correctly, the question is that obviously go MGTOW, but take away women's rights. This is one of the areas where, so taking away women's rights is one thing, and it's a very simple philosophy on its head, but I've actually had a conversation in detail behind the scenes with TFM about it, and I agree with his viewpoint, and it's not take away women's rights per se, it's don't give anybody rights without the equivalent responsibilities. And that's really the frustrating piece, because if you don't have any skin in the game, you shouldn't have any word as to what decisions are made. So if you're not a net taxpayer and you're just a fucking leech on the system, you should not vote, because all you're going to do is vote for more welfare. I completely oppose the welfare state. Get off your ass and go do something. If you have a legitimate disability, that's something completely different, right? But if your disability is that you're fat, or if your disability is that, you drink too much fucking 2 liters of Coke every day, maybe you need to change your lifestyle. Maybe these are lifestyle choices that you need to be thinking about. But this idea that, like in the United States, and I'm taking this from an American perspective because I know that every country is different, but in the United States, men are required to sign up for selective service, the draft, the military draft, the conscription, before they're allowed to vote. If they don't sign up, they're not only not allowed to vote, they're not allowed to get a federal job, nor are they allowed to get any kind of financial aid for school. However, women are allowed to vote as a privilege, but they don't have to have any of those they don't get any of those responsibilities if they choose not to. So they don't have to sign up for selective service. They don't have to worry about all the cost that comes with it. So for me, it's a question of, if you want the responsibility or you want the right, you need to demonstrate the responsibility. It's the difference between like a department manager and the worker bee who works under them. The worker bee who works in the department doesn't have as much responsibility as the department manager does. And as a result, the department manager has a greater level of responsibility, but they're also compensated more. They also are given more privileges in relation to that additional responsibility they're going to take care of. I don't understand why we don't do that in our politics, because at the end of the day, if you don't contribute to the society, you shouldn't have a say into the direction that society goes, because all you're doing is being a leech on the system, and people vote in the nature of their self-interest. So TFM and I've talked about this, and this is more TFM's theory than mine, but it's one that I've adopted, and that is that if you're a net taxpayer, you vote. If you vote for Congress, if you are a military veteran, you vote for the president. If you're a disabled military veteran, then you vote for Congress, but you don't vote for the president. So that kind of thing. But again, it's rights in relation to responsibilities. And, most people don't pay taxes. So they're not when I say that, I mean they're not net taxpayers. And you have to be, I think, in any country that you live in, you have to be a net taxpayer, because the people who invest in the country, the people who put skin in the game, the people who put their money where their mouth is, those should be the people who are making the decisions, because they're the ones who are paying the freight. If you don't pay the freight, you shouldn't get a say in what the fuck happens. So I know that sounds like a harsh reality, but it should be. It's just like anything else, right? I mean, if you go into business with somebody and they don't invest in the business, they don't put any money toward the business, but they just pull money out of the business all the time, do you really want to go into business with that person? Well, absolutely not. Not only is it not an appropriate way to go into business with somebody, it's sure as fuck not a way to run a country. So that's my thought. Apoc?
No, I think you slam dunked that one.
Okay.
I'll just say a side comment to Sir 150 on the channel. Yes, sir, I am a Buddhist, and I have been for over 25 years. Just as a side point.
Fair enough. All right, next question. We having a blonde moment again, or did she mute yourself again?
I did have a blonde moment. I will just say I don't think that's quite what he meant by the question.
Okay.
What? I don't really have an answer for any way to resolve the conflicts except for to be like us. So
can you restate it real quick, and maybe I can give it a quick shot?
Okay. So I'll read it exactly as you said. You say MGTOW is a passive philosophy, walking away, ghosting, and that makes perfect sense from all that I know about MGTOW. But in the same breath, you also say that we need to take women's rights away, specifically voting. Rights away to solve the problems that are tearing Western civilization down, which also makes perfect sense. These are mutually exclusive terms. How do you resolve the conflicting points?
They're not mutually exclusive because you're mistaking MGTOW for an activist movement.
Right.
In other words, taking women's rights away is the way for me to no longer be MGTOW. If women's rights go, if voting rights and the other additional rights and privileges that women have are balanced with their responsibilities, then I will no longer be MGTOW. That's how that's balanced out.
Right. And I would be the same. All right. Next question.
Okay. All right. A couple of them are the same. Like, how do they deal with purple pill, blue pill people?
Before you jump in there, let me say one more thing. Guys, we're coming up on 2 hours. We've got about another 15 minutes in the stream, so I know we have a lot of questions, and I definitely want to address them, but I don't like to run the Sunday stream for more than 2 hours per session, so just kind of an FYI. So we'll be answering questions all up to the 2 hour mark. If you asked a question and did get it asked or answered, I apologize for that. I just want to make sure that you put that out there. So, because we are getting a lot of questions, and I mean, I'm happy to take them, but again, I want to kill the stream at 2 hours. So just kind of an FYI. Go ahead, Lily.
Okay. Do you want me to get selective or just keep going?
Keep going. That's fine. Just take them in order.
All right. Do you think women can get male DNA from aborted baby boys?
Potentially, yeah.
That's one of the theories in the white paper.
Guys, they scrape it out. Just gonna say that.
Yeah, but
that's one of the theories. That's one of the theories.
Yeah, the DNA gets transferred during the through the umbilical cord, basically.
Right.
Okay. What do you think about the notion that men and women might not be meant to be together? That monogamy may have been required to build civilization, but now it's built, we should just allow both men and women to revert back to their natural inclinations.
I thought about this, but go ahead.
Go ahead, Apoc. I'll let you lead on this.
The only way that would be possible is if we have an artificial womb.
Yeah, and I would say this. I think that this. Yeah, I think the idea of monogamy, and so people understand. The reason I think monogamy is important is because I've seen the studies. Children and families and communities all do better when the biological mother and the biological father raise their children to the age of maturity. In situations where there are non-monogamous relationships, if you know what they call those communities, they call them ghettos. They're places of poverty. I think Trump may have properly referred to them, may or may not have properly referred to them, depending on what you believe, as shitholes. Places that don't adopt family values, places that don't adopt ethics or any kind of monogamous relationships, they go to dog shit very, very quickly. And I agree with Apoc. I think the only way around it is through the artificial womb, because it does break the cycle. But until then, I think that when it comes to stable societies and societies that constantly improve, I think monogamy is the way forward. Now, with that in mind, I can anticipate the next question being, well, but you're MGTOW. Why would you promote this? Well, I would promote it in a perfect world, but the reality is, and this is something we've said across the entire stream today, was that the gynocentric laws have allowed for female hypergamy to run around unrestrained, while at the same time restraining male dominance. So from a cost-benefit analysis, I'm MGTOW as a form of self-preservation. But if these laws were repealed and if balance was restored to the legal systems, I would no longer be MGTOW. So in a perfect world, sure. From a societal standpoint, sure. Monogamy, I think, is the way forward until we have the artificial womb. But until then, until the balance is restored, MGTOW is the way forward.
Okay. Next question then. What do you gentlemen think about vasectomies? Are they going to be an effective solution for dealing with women, or is it just a temporary solution?
I support them.
Yeah, I mean, it gets you out of child support, right?
Yeah. And you can reverse them.
Yeah, you can actually get a specific vasectomy, which is reversible. But also they're coming out with a new contraceptive called Vasogel, which I've been watching carefully.
Yeah. For some reason, though, they can't find the backing. I think there might be some pressure there. But yeah, Vasogel is a good option. But until then, yeah, I mean, vasectomies are a viable way forward. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Time for you to shill DDJ. Someone asked, where can they purchase your upcoming book or proofread to provide feedback or something? Basically, they want early access.
Once my book is finished, once the drafts are finished, I'll be selecting a group of beta readers. And this is what I did last time. I'll select a group of beta readers. I've got a primary editor, and I'll have a couple secondary editors as well. And what I'll end up doing is I'll end up splitting the book up into chapters, and then each beta reader will read a chapter, and then go from there. So, but once we're closer to that date, I will provide more information on that. My goal is to try to have my next book released sometime between June and July. We'll see how far that goes, because I've experienced a little bit of mission creep in this book, and so the book's going to be a little bit bigger than I originally thought just because of all the content that's there. But I don't want it to be so big that people won't read it, and I also want to make sure that it's in the same type of easily digestible format and verbiage that the last book was in.
Okay. And people want to know, will this be the show's new time or temporary, permanent?
I'm testing out this new time just because I stream for upwards of 5 or 6 hours a night with TFM on Saturday nights, in other words, last night. And I enjoy being able to relax a little bit Sunday morning. And so running the stream at 10:30 was a great option earlier, but pushing it back gives me a little bit more time to relax between streams, because doing the back-to-back streams started kind of burning me out. I will say this, next week's stream is going to be, if everything goes well, it's going to be a double stream. So the first stream will start at 10:30 Pacific Standard Time or 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's going to be the Layman's Legal Clinic with MGTOW Esquire, and we're going to be going into some complementary legal subjects that we didn't cover last time, and we're going to be doing a little bit more of a deep dive. Again, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end, and then I'm hoping that if everything works out well, we're going to be doing a second stream approximately an hour later, where I'm going to be interviewing an anti-feminist who's got a rather large YouTube channel, and she's a aspiring actress out of Hollywood. So hopefully we'll, if the schedules go right, because her schedule is day by day, hopefully we'll have that second stream as well.
Okay. And they also want to know why I'm here.
I needed a Q&A thought. I think it's important to have somebody help me out. I specifically chose Lily because she's an anti-feminist, and because I don't think that MGTOW should be a safe space. I think it's important for people to be able to communicate, and if I'm going to tell you, I made a video called Avoid Relationships, Not Women. If I'm going to be telling everybody that they need to learn how to interact with women, then I need to be able to model the behavior. More importantly, there's going to be a certain group of the audience who will actually show up just to hear Lily. They won't give a shit about anything I say. They don't give a shit about anything Apoc says. They're going to be like, holy shit, there's a female on the stream, and they're just going to come to the yard. And you'll notice that...
What can I say?
Right. Yeah, so there you go. So thought lives matter. Now you know.
Wonderful eye candy.
Yeah, exactly. Not a hater. All right, next question.
Okay. That one's for me, which is weird.
Okay, go ahead.
Am I being converted or still observing MGTOW? I wouldn't say I was being converted, but I'm definitely listening to what you guys have to say, and it's very interesting every time. So I don't know if that answers the question.
All right. Well, next question.
All right. Will the patriarchy be restored any time within our lifetime?
Not unless there's a collapse. Now, I will say this though: it's been kind of interesting. Yeah, Grizzly, let's all read together. I think it is interesting that with regard to the patriarchy, because like the Me Too movement has really fucked things up for feminists, because they've realized that they've hit imperial overreach, and you can see they're terrified because second wave feminists are coming out and they're like, holy shit, we need to stop this Me Too movement, we need to stop this witch hunt, because they realize they've gone full retard, and that's a serious issue. So, Apoc, you want to add to that?
No, I mean, the answer is I don't think so, unless, like as you say, there's a collapse. I will add one quick thing. With the world the way it is and the fundamental difference in the world today as it ever has been, and that's true given the global telecommunications network and technology levels we have, I think that the amount of chaos in the world is making it much more difficult to use historical precedent to predict what will happen next.
I would agree with that.
Okay,
I did notice a bunch of people were asking me about my background in Buddhism. Is that true?
They were. I was just about to say, if you want to go to like the last couple of questions, people were asking about games, asking more about Buddhism. Go ahead, talk away.
Well, just I've been practicing Buddhism for a very long time. I'm a Nagpa, which is sort of householder priest person, I guess. There's really no Western translation. Basically, it means I've gone through a certain process, and they gave me the holy bop, and I'm all good, and all the fun things. But really, just means I studied a lot and I learned a lot. And I'm not a religious Buddhist, if people are asking. That's not what I am. So essentially, I'm not a religious follower of Tibetan Buddhism. Nor are they asking me to be. I'm basically a non-lay practitioner of Tibetan Buddhism who is not bound by monastic vows, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I have practiced with a number of lamas and different people. I never met the Dalai Lama, but a long time ago I met the Panchen Lama, and there's some history there, but I'm a serious Buddhist, in other words.
Right. Well, what about alpacas? You've met lamas. What about alpacas?
Alpacas are awesome. Their fur makes wonderful. Is it called fur? Their hair makes wonderful yarn. I actually have a sweater made of it.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on. Next question.
Okay, somebody asked me if I've gotten any better at helicopter rides, or flying them, should I say? DDJ, I think you can answer that one.
She is a little bit better. Yeah, she's a little bit better at flying. She can't drive worth a shit though. So like ground vehicles, holy shit. I'll probably do another stream and showcase her lack of driving skills sooner than later. But yeah. I will say this though.
Hey, I can crash very well, thank you.
Yes, she crashes and burns very well. But she's getting better. She's getting better in the actual combat piece of it. So I've been rather impressed given her lack of experience in 3D shooter games in general and how far she's come. So she's not quite full retard anymore. She's a little bit less than that. But yeah, I mean she's pretty competent now.
Okay. Last question. Thoughts on women in the MGTOW sphere? Good try.
I don't really have any thoughts on the MGTOW sphere. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who speak to, like in the MGTOW community, who speak to women. I don't think that's really an issue. I mean, this whole like WGTOW thing, I think, is a joke, and I think it's women needing to be attention whores on things. But I think that when it comes to women interacting with MGTOW, it's funny. I'm seeing a huge amount of women reaching out to MGTOW now because, number one, the MRA movement is dead. And a lot of women have realized that feminism is hurting women as much as it's hurting men, if not more so, because a lot of men are going MGTOW. And the stated MGTOW community, online may be 100, 150,000 people, but the unstated MGTOW community throughout the world is in the tens of millions. So it is growing, and women are being ghosted, and they are really, really concerned about it. So I think that providing the education is important. And if a woman wants to come to the MGTOW community and learn why she can't find a man who's willing to do anything other than pump and dump her, well, I'm happy to provide the information, because who knows? Maybe women will rise up and kill feminism. I doubt it, because, you can't compete with free, but you never know,
Well, most women, I've yet to speak to a woman who will agree that not being a net taxpayer means they should lose the right to vote.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's a requirement. Things will not change unless political power is taken away from those whom are not contributing.
I would agree. Okay, so I think at this point we're at 2 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and end the show the same way we end a TFM show. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to end with the Pimp's Prayer. So, Lord, please pray for the soul of this bitch and guide my pimp hand and make it strong, Lord, so that she might learn a hoe's place. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Go ahead and kill that amen in the chat. And, of course, I will go ahead and put the post-production of this video out later today. And it'll be up on YouTube. And then if you feel the need, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Feel free to subscribe to Lily's channel. I think at some point she's going to be making videos again. Apoc's actually talked about creating a YouTube channel as well. And if you're interested, obviously, hashtag shill alert. My book, The Feminist Lie, is on Amazon in both paperback and e-Kindle format. And with that, I hope everybody has a great evening. Take care.